Hey everybody, so I have another consultation to go through today, and this one is more probably along the level of many players out there that are going to be watching this video. It's a Keep 33 account that wants to be competitive in PvP and is going to be moving on towards Keep 34 and then Keep 35 obviously, and they, like many of you, want to achieve their server versus server wings and then, you know, just have fun in the game. So they're trying to find out what they can do to improve in those aspects and, you know, just prioritize what they need to get done so that they can be competitive. They did let me know that they are a moderate spender, and just looking at the account, I can see that it's a VIP 16 and that it does have some spending, and it does have resources, access to additional resources, not just like food and so on, but I mean like generals. And that's one of the concerns too, like when you have so many general tokens, you have so many generals, how do you decide on what to keep, what to get rid of, what to focus on, especially with the new Ascension system and everything. So we're going to be looking at that for this player, and I'll also mention some of the notes that they left that they wanted me to glance at. So I'm just going to be walking through this account and taking a look at where it is at in terms of its construction. When I first looked at the account, it was a Keep 33. At the very end of consumption, they queued the Keep 34, which is wonderful. They did a little bit of work on their in-city tiles. And it seems like most of their buildings are already at level 33, which will be a good setup for future keep levels because a lot of those are going to end up being requirements anyway. The in-city tiles are a little bit behind. That's okay for somebody that is a moderate spender because they, you know, have extra resources and so on from boxes. But it is something that you're going to want to work on at some point. I can see the rally spot is at 33, which is good. Let's take a look at the troops while we're in here. So it looks like all the 13s are being pumped out. Most of them are at 700,000, with the exception of Siege is a little behind. Layers are looking pretty good. The lower layers are getting a bit thinner, but we don't have to worry about that just yet until we're really trying to beef up the military. So eventually you're going to want to work on those layers, maybe get it to a couple 100,000 of each, but that's not the highest priority right now. Let's take a look at the items. So scrolling through, we can see, yeah, there's a lot of general tokens that are available, some interesting decorations that haven't been claimed yet. What else do we have here? Wow, that's a lot of subordinate city clue chests and so on. Okay. I want to take a look at the speed ups now. Yep, speed ups plentiful, not a problem there. And lots of refining stones, so that's good news. We know that we can do a lot of refining if we need to. Lots and lots of well, research stones, tactic scrolls. You can't use the tactic scrolls yet, or the dragon source stones yet, but it is adding up so that when we get to that point at Keep 36, that we'll be able to use those. Taking a look at the subsidies, we got the main one is Japan, so it's Japan culture. Got a mix of China, Korea, Japan, Russia. Eventually, if you want to be PvP competitive, you're going to want to narrow that down to probably just Japan, or maybe a mix of Russia too, and that could be okay as well. But for now, for growth, the Korea and China are just fine. Looking at the generals, let's take a look at Alfred. So Alfred is typically an archer, even though his skill book is Archer and Siege. He's typically used as an archer general, and what I'm seeing by looking at this general is it's being used as a split between Siege and Archer. And that's not something you typically want to do. Typically, you want to focus on just one troop type. It's better to be a master of one thing than to be below average at everything. So what I would definitely recommend here is especially for the long-term pieces that you're going to be using, like the Plantagenet and the Choreo or whatever you plan to put on here. Refine it specifically for one troop type, and in this case you're going to want it to be Archer if you're using Alfred. So that's definitely something to work on, and that will improve your stats and make you much stronger than you already are. "84 out of 84 generals." So we're going to be looking at trying to reduce some of that. Obviously, you're going to want to keep all of your duty officers like Ban Chao, Guan Riul, Skanderbeg. You're going to want to keep all of those ones that have a purpose. You don't necessarily need to keep duplicates of them, although they might be ascended in the future. Although Ascension of duty officers, probably not the highest priority considering how difficult it is to get Blood of Ares. So you can get rid of any duplicates you have of those. Taking a look at Leonidas here while we're there, the main defense general. First things I notice, the refines are kind of scattered, which is perfectly fine and actually recommended for a main defense general. You want to have a good mix of different kinds of troops, absolutely true. Focusing HP more on cavalry and maybe ground, focusing attack on possibly archer archer and ground and siege, but you don't have a lot of siege right now. And defense can be mostly ground and really whatever you get high numbers on. My concern here is you have some dragon gear. You have a lot of dragon gear on your Leonidas, where at the very minimum you should have Achemenidae to provide that debuff. So that's definitely something to change, and you want to make sure that your skill books on the Leonidas have not only the siege range bonus, but also the archer range bonus. I don't think you had archer range bonus there. Looking at the subordinate city generals like this Arminius here, I see that he's cultivated quite a bit and he's starred. For a subordinate city general, you don't really have to go through that trouble. I mean, I did, but that was not because I wanted to cultivate them. It's because I used them temporarily a long time ago for duty officers and so on to get those bonuses. But if I didn't need those at the time, like you don't because you have specialty ones. The other major growth area for these subordinate city generals is they must be equipped with 6 out of 6 Achemenidae gear to make complete use of them. You want to have as many subordinate cities as possible with useful generals, but the biggest benefit in PvP is from the debuffs that full set of Achemenidae gear provides. So that's a tough thing to do. It takes a lot of materials and it takes a lot of time, but just know that that is the primary purpose of having these debuff generals. Now, one of the concerns that this player had was there's a lot up in the air about Ascension, and it's not really certain which general they should go with for the future because we don't really know what's happening. And they wanted to know what generals should be sold, converted to fragments for later use, and which should potentially be priorities for PvP. So what I'll say is, first, keep rally capacity generals like Tomiris, Alexander the Great, Philip II as a just in case for the future. You don't know what your role will necessarily be in the future when your alliance builds itself up. So definitely keep those as a just in case. Never get rid of your Theodora or your Baybars or Queen Jindiox. They'll always be useful. You need your duty officers and so on. Don't get rid of those. You don't need the duplicates necessarily, but make sure you have all those for sure. Now, in terms of PvP generals and wall general, there's a lot of considerations to really take into account. So you're going to want to decide on your endgame generals for each troop type and just focus on those. It's really not effective to be jumping from general to general to general like many people do, especially with the amount of investment that goes into specialties and into Ascension these days. It doesn't make sense. So you have a few things to consider. And I'll kind of talk about in general what I mean here. So do you want to base your decision on what's known right now? Only a few generals are able to ascend at the moment, and if you base it on right now, that's fine. The differences between top generals, it's not game breaking or anything. So choosing something to work on now and sticking to it even when something better comes along in the future is a perfectly safe and good decision. For example, this would be like choosing Electra or Simeon as your archer PvP generals. Electra or Simeon are both able to ascend right now, and therefore they're a very safe choice for the future. Do you want to instead gamble on the future for something that potentially could be better later? For example, I prefer Minamoto due to his versatility, and it's just so easy to get him because he's in the tavern. However, Minamoto is a gamble, as it's not a certainty whether or not he will be able to ascend in the future. So he might not work out. The last major consideration is, how serious do you see yourself spending? If you're planning to spend a lot, you might choose multiple hard-to-get generals for ascending like Simeon. If not, you should probably go with safer ascendable generals like Electra, Ulysses, Martinez, or something similar. And it's a lot to consider, it's a lot to talk about, so I think this is something that we should talk one-to-one over Discord. One of the other concerns that this player had was in terms of equipment and how to equip generals. There are so many options, and so many of the options seem to be a matter of preference, especially with how to choose to use your civilization gear. Now, there is a perfect route based on having all of your civilization gear unlocked and everything, but that's not a realistic option for pretty much every person out there. So what you should probably do is start off focusing on what is going to be most effective for you as an individual player. Most players will start to focus on their archer generals first, and getting those as far along as possible is probably the right way to go. So take a look at some of the gear, it's Plantagenet or Freedom or whatever you have, and see how you can effectively equip your generals to get the most out of what you do have. Now, I think that the easiest way, and I'll remind everyone that's watching this, the easiest way to do this, in my opinion, is to use my general gear planning spreadsheet, because you can just play around with the buffs and all the different gear pieces that you have and find something that works well for you. Outside of that, if you need individual help after we discuss which generals to go with and how to set them up over Discord and I answer those questions, then we can kind of play around with the spreadsheet based on the equipment that you have and find something that will work for you on an individual level. It's not something I can really do just right now on the fly in a video, because there's gear being crafted and everything has to be refined, but we can play around with it on the spreadsheet and see what the future might look like for your PvP general. But I would say focus on one and be a master at something for now. Now, the other question, and one of the focus areas this player wanted me to look at, was the idea of PvP before 35. In our emails, I did mention that I didn't personally believe it to be a great idea to do a whole lot of PvP before Keep 35. It's just such a massive difference between low 30s and 35. As soon as you unlock all that tier 14 and you've got your big research that you can do and you have your rally spot at 35 and so on, I mean, the difference between a player at that stage with those buildings developed to 35 and then something that is even 33 or 34 is huge. It's really huge. So it makes a lot more sense to rush to Keep 35, get yourself situated, and then start to work on your generals and your troops and starting to get really competitive at that point. Anything before that really just slows down your growth to Keep 35. Now, being a moderate spender, this player is able to push past some of the issues that free-to-play players would have in their attempt to get to keep 35. So it does make it a little bit easier, but still, just getting to keep 35 first and then worrying about the rest is a whole lot more effective. To get these server versus server wings, for example, to get into that top 5 or top 10 that you need for that, to do so as a keep 33, 32, 34 is going to be quite, I mean, it's possible, it does happen, but it's very risky and way more difficult than it would be to just be one of the keep 35s with an average kind of arsenal of troops. It's just going to be a lot easier at keep 35, and I highly suggest getting that done. But if there's a situation that comes along, like you've already built up some troops, you're already okay in that regard, really what you need to work on, from what I've seen, is the troop buffs and your generals. Like if you have built up a really strong archer march and you have a decent amount of archer troops and you find a good target, you can get a lot of points, and you can, just off of 1 or 2 hits, you can get the top 10 and get your server to server wings. Absolutely. But you want to be in a position of strength rather than in a position of weakness. And right now your generals are not set up for that to be very effective. And by participating in server versus server, you are really at risk of losing a lot more than you probably want. And it's just my suggestion to wait till 35. But it is possible, yes. Just a lot more difficult than it would be by just waiting a month or 2 and getting to that place. Now, that being said, since you are built up quite a bit for PvP already, my suggestion, and I think you're already doing this, is to really focus your efforts on being successful in battlefields and growing there. And you'll see a huge difference in battlefields when you start to work on your buffs a bit more, when you build up your wall general and your first PvP march. You'll see a huge difference. And when you start to get a lot more comfortable in your success in battlefields, and you know that you can be successful in server as a server, that's when you want to try for the wings. But if you try before you're really sure of your place, it's just a huge risk. So I would very much suggest working on your success in battlefield, and when you can start to crush people with your marches and you can do a lot of damage, that's when you want to be cautiously attempting server to server to get those wings. Now, one of the questions was, what troops should I prioritize to fill marches? You want, for defense, a mix of everything, absolutely. And same thing as I mentioned on your Leonidas, you want to have buffs that kind of cover all your bases. But in terms of filling marches, you probably, for now, at the stage that you're at, you just want to focus on doing one thing very well. And my suggestion will be for archers or ground. So work on one of those, pick, it doesn't really matter which one, both can be very successful in different situations. Most people go with archers, but pick either archer or ground to focus on and just become a master at that for now, and then you'll start to work on the rest as you get a little more situated at keep 35 and above. Another area this player wanted me to take a look at is just sub-city generals and how to choose what debuffs to go for, what things to prioritize. And that's not just for the skill books, that's also for the actual gear and so on. So when you're looking at selecting your subordinate city generals that you're going to use, let's take a look at what you have here. First, look at the skill book. All right, so this one, for example, Arminius, enemy ground troops and mounted troops HP by 10%, enemy ranged troops and siege machine attack by 15%. All right, so one of the absolute highest priority things to debuff is archer or ranged troops attack. Siege attack is very important to debuff as well, but you're going to find that the Achaemenid gear provides so much of that passively, you don't really have to worry about finding other sources of ranged troop debuff. However, very little of the Achaemenid gear actually provides a debuff to enemy ranged troops, so you have to look for it in skill books and in the 6 out of 6 piece for Achaemenid, and that's where you're going to get a lot of your debuff that you need. So you want to be stacking that as much as possible, and you're going to find that Andrew Jackson right over here is probably one of the easiest ways to get that done because he's available in the tavern. And yes, here enemy range troops by 20% versus enemy ranged troops and siege machine attack by 15% doesn't seem like a huge difference. But when you add that to 8 generals or 9 generals, depending on how many subordinate cities you have, it does add up. And keep in mind that you can only debuff 50% of somebody's attack or stat or whatever. And Siege Machine is almost always going to be maxed anyway, just because of the way that Achaemenid gear is set up. So you really want to focus on ranged troop attack. Whatever you can find in terms of the producing the gear in terms of for your subordinate cities is just going to be the highest priority if you're looking at enemy ranged troops. So look for things like Andrew Jackson. Arminius is okay if you don't have enough Andrew Jacksons, but there are better choices out there. Here's a decent one. Reduces enemy ranged troops and siege machine by 10% and enemy ground troops and mounted troops defense by 20%. Now, some of the other important stats other than ranged troop attack are debuffing ground troops, HP, and defense. That's going to be pretty big. Mounted HP is pretty important to debuff as well. And I mean, you want it to be spread out. You want to have high debuffs of everything, so that you could potentially debuff 50. I mean, the ideal would be to debuff 50% of every single stat, if that were possible. It's just that you have to keep in mind that some people have ridiculous buffs, so you have to have ridiculous debuffs to match. And usually it's going to be archers that are the most difficult, so just focus on that. That's a lot of rambling, but here, this looks really good. Like the Nordic Barbarian King, reducing enemy ranged troops attack by 30% and enemy troop defense by 10%. Phenomenal. If you had a couple of those, you're doing great. Andrew Jackson, yes, absolutely not too great here. I mean, he's fine in a pinch if you don't have anything else, but when it's so easy to get Andrew Jacksons, I would just put Andrew Jackson on and then replace the Andrew Jacksons with slightly better debuff generals if you find those along the way. Yeah, so that's not enough. And mounted troop attack, you don't really worry about so much as opposed to archer. So that's really where you want to focus your energy, is getting that archer debuff and you know, generalizing everything, but focusing on the archer debuff. Now, what other things did this player ask about? Other than putting the wrong books on some subordinate city generals, are there any mistakes that need to be remedied? I kind of talked about this before. The books for subordinate city generals are not huge. They're not huge. Some people, yes, would benefit from putting something like Rebirth on. That improves your troop death to survival rate by 5%. And if you have those books, throw them onto some subordinate city generals. It keeps them active longer. If you're getting hit a lot in PvP, it does help. I never get in the situation where I run out of troops in my subordinate city, probably because of academy research and so on. But if you are running into that situation, and it doesn't really hurt to put that on. Now, the construction and the gold production, I mean, it's nice to build up subordinate cities, but they don't do a whole lot. The buildings inside don't do a whole lot. It doesn't provide a lot of benefits. So should you go out of your way to put those kind of books on all your subordinate city generals? No, absolutely not. Same reason you wouldn't really care about cultivating or starring. It just doesn't do anything. The only thing, or the major thing, that these subordinate cities are useful for is providing debuffs through their skill book and the gear. Anything else, even if they're level 1, nothing else comes close to mattering as much as that. Okay? Not even specialties, nothing else. So you don't have to worry about those. You don't really have to worry about skill books. If you want to put on Rebirth, go ahead. But I wouldn't say it's crucial unless you're finding that you are running out of troops and your subordinate cities are not acting in PvP. And in that case, you definitely want to put it on. That's about it for subordinate cities. They asked me to look at their buildings and seeing any general deficiencies. Yeah, the in-city tiles need to be worked on a little bit, but since you're a slight spender, not a big deal. Everything else seems pretty good. You're just going to, I mean, you've got your research factory at 33, you've got your art hall at 33, so you got some of the prerequisites for the keep 34. You've already done 34 actually, never mind. And your academy is going to go up to 30. No, you're doing good. You're doing good in terms of buildings, and that's not a concern at all. It's really just getting PvP ready, I think, is what your account needs more than anything, and that's going to happen through proper gear, choosing your generals, and definitely working on those debuffs within your subordinate cities. Let me just take one more look around just to see what else I can spot. And of course, if you have questions beyond what is inside of this video and you want to talk about some additional thoughts or concerns that come up, feel free to just hit me up on Discord and I will discuss those with you, because it can only cover so much in a 20-30 minute video anyway, and I'm sure you do have more questions along the way. So that's about all I'll put into this video. Hopefully it helped you and it helped other people, and I'll just say a general note to people out there: if you are looking for your own consultation or a real estate video or something like that, just send me an email at TheMiserEvony@gmail.com and I'll give you the details and we can make that happen if you are interested. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting the channel. If you liked what you saw, please consider hitting the like button and checking out other videos on The Miser's Guide to Evony. I'll see you in the next video.